Hello and welcome to this episode of T-Tech. On today's episode, we're going to be upgrading a very old firewall. So, this is the Dell Optiplex GX1, and I've had it for a long time. And this has been my firewall, but it is time to upgrade it. So, the main thing with this is, yes, it can boot off optical media, so a CD, but it can't boot off USB, and it can boot off Pixie, but, there's about only two ways to use to boot this machine and upgrade. So, what we'll do first real quick is just zoom in so you can see. It is certified Y2K compatible. It came with a Pentium 2, it's been upgraded to about a 500 MHz processor, and it's made for Windows 98. So that is the box we're dealing with. And here are the ports on the back. Just have four ports here, and they're all Ethernet. I can have four networks, but I can also use VLANs, so I can have a lot more than that if I wanted. So the first thing I do to do this procedure is you want to take the cover off. There's just two buttons on the side there, and then you can pull the cover up and off of there. And on the inside, we have the processor there. It's one of the older ones that plug right into the board in a little bit different way. The hard drive and its enclosure, the floppy disk, the CD-ROM, the power supply, and of course the main board. And this one actually has kind of an extension thing where you plug it in and it actually adds PCI and ISA ports. I believe it comes with that. I'm not entirely sure. But that is what that has, and that's how I have the PCI cards plugged into there. So once we get in there, though, the hard drive here, we want to disconnect the IDE cable here. And underneath this in the picture is the Molex power connector. We want to disconnect both of those. So here's how it looks when you disconnect the IDE cable. Make sure not to bend the pins. And when you put it back in, if this one you can kind of see it, there's a key on the other one here. And you want to make sure that lines up with the key indentation on the port there. Down here is the jumpers, so you can tell it which drive to boot off of and things like that. And of course the power adapter, power connector. And then that's how it looks like when it's removed. And then you want to take the entire thing out, and you'll end up with the drive, and it'll be inside its enclosure. Now the last thing you do here is you take the drive, and I believe you plug it into an IDE to SATA, IDE/SATA to USB adapter. So, in short, this blue piece here, the black piece with the blue light, converts the IDE or SATA signal from the hard drive into USB, so I can plug it in and interact with it like it was a normal USB device. And the other part here is a Molex power connector. It gives power, in this case, just from the wall instead of the main board, the main power supply. And that just plugs in there. So that's the setup. And that's the steps you take to get the hard drive out, plug it into the adapter, and then plug it into your computer. So in the next part, we're just going to kind of skip ahead a little bit, and I'm going to show how to convert the VDI file after we install in VirtualBox into a RAW file, and then we'll use DD to put it on the hard drive. So I will see you in 1 second. Okay, so now we have installed OpenBSD and made our VDI file and everything, and the drive is inserted with the adapter. So the first thing I want to do here, I'm in Linux at this point. We're going to do sudo fdisk-l, and the drive is /dev/sdb. So what we want to do is I've went to where the VM file is. So if we ls, we want to look at, there's a test one we made a second ago, but that's what we'll end up making. We want to look at the VDI file. So we want to use vbox manage and with the command clone HD, and we want to put in there OpenBSD, what we named it, but you want to make sure it ends in .vdi. And then after that, your next argument is the name you want it to end up as. So we're going to say OBSD65 IMG. And after that, it is important to put the switch format space raw in all caps. This makes it a raw disk image that will be able to be read by the BIOS and everything. So when we hit enter here, if everything is okay, you're going to see a percentage, and when it gets to 100%, you will have obsd65.img in the directory you are in right now. So it'll take a little bit. I made it 20 gigs. And that's another thing with making these files. If you make them in a way, like if I was to make that 160 gigs, which is what the disk actually is, it would take, so much longer to do the cloning, so much longer to DD it. At this point, you could always make another partition after the fact if you really wanted to. But, yeah, that's how we do it for this anyway. So, you can apply this stuff to anything like with a CF card. You could even do this and put it on a USB if you really wanted to. If you want to do like a read-only mount of your file system. There's lots of different ways you can use this besides just to update a very old computer. But yeah, so with that, I'm going to pause this, and I will be back when it's done, and we'll start the DD. Okay, welcome back. It just finished. Now, if you did this prior, and then you try to do it immediately again, it won't register the identifier of the disk. It's fairly harmless unless you want to use that disk in another virtual machine. You'd have to change the ID. But anyway, OBSD65IMG is what we end up with. And if we run file to see what type it is on that file, it is a master boot record boot sector with a partition and all the values it needs, so the BIOS can boot this. So yeah, that's all we need, and it actually does have the bootloader built in as well, because it copied everything, the bootloader and all the data, in the operating system. So the BIOS will be able to see this and pass its control to the bootloader, and it will do its job to boot the operating system. To get this to where we need, again, if we do this, fdisk-l, it's the devsdb. We want to use dd for the input file of the file we just made. So if we just put obsd65img, it'll just use the relative path because we're already in the directory. And for the output, we want to do devsdb. Now you can use status equals progress if you want to, but you don't have to, but you can. So we'll use status equals progress. It helps you see how much it's copying. And after all that, do make sure though, before you run this, that you don't make the disk write into the image, or that you write into the wrong disk. Like if I was to write here to my SDA disk, my main hard drive, that wouldn't be very good. So that would destroy information. But with that, once we hit enter, it will copy. Now again, the file is 21 gigs at this point. It'll take a little bit of time, but once that's done, I'll be back. Alright, now it's all done. And it took 514 seconds. So now we're just going to reverse the steps and put it all back together. And then I'll reboot it. And I will see you then.